Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. In this week's program, the meddling in our milk. More on the government's moves to change raw milk regulations. Is this the biggest threat to our dairy industry since Fonterra was formed? Consultations underway, but opposition and anger is mounting with talk of farmers fighting back. The challenge goes out to retailers to make milk more affordable. A boutique Auckland grocery chain drops its prices to $1 a litre and challenges other supermarket sellers to do the same, the shelf price war. And the controversial Crayford farm sale goes to the judge. The OIO's approval of the Chinese bid under judicial review in the High Court, as the rival consortium led by Sir Michael Fay refuses to let it lie. Joining me in the studio this week, Ohinawai dairy farmer and lobbyist Malcolm Lumsden. Welcome back to Straight Talk. No stranger to many of you, I'm sure. And Neil McLean, a farm consultant and dairy farmer from Gordonton. It's Waikato all the way this week. Thanks for coming in, both of you. Malcolm, you're coming up to 50 years in dairy farming. I'm sure you've been through lots of ups and downs in the industry in that time. As one of the farmers in the Fonterra co-op, what do you think? Is the government meddling in raw milk regulations really the great threat that everybody's saying?
Well, it is a threat. We worked long and hard over many years and finally got to the position of the success with Fonterra, and we're seeing a decent return on our milk. And here we have the government playing socialist politics. Clearly the minister has just lost all his principles. And frankly, farmers are absolutely ropeable. Like every other business, we should have the right to sell our product for the best price, which is the world market price, and that's what we're doing.
It's not what you'd expect, as you say, from a national government, is it?
Well, where are their principles and philosophies? They've completely gone out the window. I mean, to say, if we look at the Woolworths supermarket and the other grocery monopolies, they're not requiring them to supply 5% of their product to someone who wants to start up in opposition to them and then have them deliver the product. They wouldn't get away with that under the rules of commerce. So why are they penalising Fonterra?
Neil, what are farmers telling you?
Just what Malcolm has said. It's been something that has surprised farmers right across the nation, I think. I've heard David Carter in 2 meetings say, I understand the issues, I hear your problems, we will solve the problems. And they've gone here in the proposals to amend the Act, they talk about why we've got the Act, and they were good. No problems with the reasons why we've got the Act. And they've turned around at the back and say, but hang on a minute, we're going to restrict your economic activity. We're going to put the Commerce Commission virtually into the gearbox to determine the milk price. Where's the free market? Where's the trading? It's just... I can't understand how the government actually got to this point with rational economic thought.
A lot of farmers are scratching their heads, aren't they? They're saying it defies all logic.
Well, we've been betrayed. We've been completely betrayed because in years when we had little income, we've continued to invest in our industry, put capital into Fonterra, build a world successful company, and now we've got this nonsense coming along. And I don't
for what?
Yeah, and for what? And I don't think any other business would stand for it.
The reason seemed to be to protect the investors of the Singapore Superannuation Fund, Bright Dairy China Fund, Nutritech from Russia.
Yeah.
Other co-ops who have been going 100 years need protection, like Tatua and Western. Give us a break. Yeah.
The public are not going to benefit from this.
No.
Because the minister's already said they've looked at how Fonterra is pricing the milk internally and they can't find fault with it. And I hope Fonterra are right, because I would be the first one to take our directors to task if they're not being fair and above board with the local price. But really, this is just an absolute nonsense, and I just can't believe that a minister of this state would interfere in the normal rules of commerce the way they're interfering with Fonterra.
It's a tight timetable. I think it's, till the end of February for submissions from farmers. Are people getting out there and making their feelings known?
I think that's the submissions before it goes to the House, and then there's a select committee where they will consider the Act as proposed. The 25th is, well, this is what we're going to put to the House. Do we have to change anything? And again, Wellington being Wellington, it's unlikely that unless there's an earthquake, something's going to shift.
You have to wonder why is the government seemingly trying to weaken one of New Zealand's, if not New Zealand's biggest success story when you look at what Fonterra's achieved in the last 10, 11 years? Well,
New Zealand only has 1.8% of the total milking herd in the world. So we're not big, but we are big competing internationally. And we sell most of our product overseas. If we can't compete internationally, then we can't survive. The New Zealand consumer benefits all the way by the income that Fonterra brings in. If we look at those people who are complaining about food prices, well, get a life. Quite frankly, they should be looking at the wider food stocks, the monopoly held on food prices by the two supermarkets. We haven't heard much criticism of that. Why aren't they saying to government, if it's good enough for you to do this to Fonterra, why don't you do it to the other monopoly food consumers? You know, let's be even-handed about this. They won't do that because it'll breach all our laws of commerce.
So why is it they can get away with meddling with Fonterra? Why is that seen as fair game?
Yeah, well, that's the question farmers are raising. And I tell you, there is such an irate feeling out there amongst farmers. They feel betrayed, and this government would go for a fall if a vote was taken today.
How much of a groundswell of opinion, because you straight furrow, Jeff Smith in his editorial front page this week, big article there saying, you know, this is one of the biggest farmer protests possibly in many years taking shape. Are we looking at tractors on the steps of Parliament? I asked him that last week. What do you think?
Well, the young people in the industry are prepared to do it. It's the young ones in the industry that are now speaking out. The young shamrockers saying, well, where are we going?
Yeah, why are we investing?
Yeah. The only thing I'm concerned about is that we shouldn't allow this debate to overshadow which I believe is a more important debate, and that's the trading of shares. And so we need to be cautious. This is a philosophical debate. The other one is really a fiscal debate as to where we retain ownership of our industry. So there's two very important debates going on. This one's more emotive than the other one. But I think Fonterra farmers have got to pick both debates up.
What do you think, Neil? I mean, is this not a sideshow, but a distraction, a deliberate distraction possibly from the trading among farmers scheme?
The government is thinking about the urban vote. I mean, that's where they rise or fall, is the mortgage, what I call a mortgage belt around Auckland and Wellington and Christchurch. And if they can show, I suppose this is their logic, if they can show how they're keeping the price down and keeping milk affordable, but bread's gone up more in a greater percentage than milk. Beef and lamb has gone up in a greater percentage. If this boutique supermarket, if that price that they're talking about drop happened to my milk price, what that means is that the average farmer receives, it's about a 30-cent drop. That's about, it's something like $3 a milk price. I think it's about a 10 to 1 to litres to kgs of solids. Look, that's every dollar is worth $300 per household in New Zealand.
We all benefit.
Per person, not per household, per person. So you've got to buy a lot of milk.
Coming up, more on our white oil. The small supermarket leading the charge to make milk more affordable, challenging the supermarket giants to do the same. We ask, who are the real rip-off merchants? Stay with us on Straight Talk. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy, and with me, Neil McLean and Malcolm Lumsden. A boutique Auckland grocery chain this week charged into the price of milk war. The shelf price, that is, dropping its prices to $1 a litre and laying down the gauntlet to the supermarket giants to do the same. Neil, this didn't go unnoticed by you. I mean, it's obviously a marketing gimmick. This is a boutique grocery chain. I think it only has 6 stores. But still, it's making the point, isn't it, that, you know, somebody's getting ripped off here.
No. Who's going to go without the reward for capital? I mean, if you're going to... Your typical household brand is worth about $1.30, $1.50 a litre. They're going to charge $1. who's going to go without their reward for the capital invested and the risk involved in supplying that market? That's a 30% discount? Somebody's margin is zero.
Malcolm, your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. My concern is that the Fonterra reflect the true price and they're charging. That's my principal concern. And if this man can sell milk through his grocery stores at that, I think that gives the public a good indication that the margins are not all wrong on the farmer side, that there is a substantial margin in the supermarket chain. And
there's an incredible margin, I think, isn't there?
Well, we don't know what that margin is, so let's flush it out. What I would be concerned about, though, is if we had the situation like in Australia, where the big supermarket chains there have ratcheted the price of milk back to such an extent that the dairy industry now is going belly up and farmers are leaving the industry in droves over there. That's not good for anyone. You've got to maintain a level of income for the dairy farmers because the public has an expectation that we provide better environmental outcomes on our farms, and if we haven't got the resource and the income to do that, then that's a false economy for everyone.
Do you feel farmers still get a bad rap?
Yeah, I think that we are a minority in the wider sphere of things. I mean, we go back 2 generations and everyone had a relation or a direct contact on farm and you went for farm holidays. Now, Malcolm, you have secondary school students from South Auckland that turn up for their geography. How many have been on a farm before they turn up to your place?
Very few, and in fact we have several busloads a year. We encourage schools to come onto our farm. And one of the interesting lessons that I give them is that they're going to get a hamburger after they are there. So I say to them, what in that hamburger pack hasn't come from a farm? Oh, well, the paper mister. No, we farm trees. Oh, the lettuce. No. And that's and you go through the hamburger and there's nothing in their hand that's not produced on a farm. And because they're thinking of food and their stomach's rumbling, they really get that lesson. And the teachers tell me that's probably one of the most valuable lessons they get because they actually have to focus on where food comes from.
And the need for you to have a living so that you can exist like their parents.
Yeah, farmers deserve a bad rap, you know. Sometimes they're whingers and moaners in public and I've got no sympathy for them. You know, we take no joy about the weather. We've been saying it's been good for the farmers, but it hasn't been good for the urban people, and they have their holidays fixed at a certain time of the year, and we take no pleasure out of having rain falling when they're trying to have their holidays. I think there is a wider community, but farmers need to do their own work and get alongside the public. We need to make ourselves accessible so people can come onto our farms and see what goes on. That's the bridge we've got to cross.
You talk about having those students on your farms. It makes me wonder whether you should have a few ministers of the Crown come and get a few lessons as well, hands-on.
I had Mr Carter fly in.
They've had the benefit of your wisdom several times.
Well, Mr Carter dropped in a helicopter a couple of years ago and we were losing big money in a drought. And yeah, I think the anti-aircraft gun would be out at the moment if he tried to come and land at our place.
He'd need a resource consent, wouldn't
he? Yeah.
Do you think David Carter is failing farmers at the moment? He's the primary industries minister. You mentioned him in passing before. Is he really letting you down?
We haven't got a big volume of agricultural people in the current government. And I think that David Carter, sadly, and I wouldn't criticise him in person, but he's fallen into the traditional Wellington trap where you listen to your advisors and not the people you represent.
And the other one is that we don't understand what he's what's his end game. What does he, 5, 10, 15 years out, what is his vision of what he's trying to do with this? Because it's, like I said in the previous segment, the intent of the Act is there, and I think all farmers agree with that, but the way he's going to deliver that intent is completely mismatched, and it will fail because it's not natural money theory or natural economic flow. It's not going to work.
It's socialist rubbish. And quite frankly, when you look at the taking of milk from Fonterra, none of the other companies other than Goodman Fielder supply milk to the local market. If you're going to require Fonterra to, at its own cost and my cost, because it comes out of my cheque, to supply milk, then you've got to get a result. So if you're going to give milk to those companies, heaven forbid, let's say that they have to supply a certain percentage on the local market to qualify for that DIR milk. Now, Fonterra might say, oh, yeah, but they'll compete against us. Well, that's fine. I've got no problem with that. We'll just export our milk. We're happy to export it.
Well, you say all this has farmers telling you, to hell with the local market then, we'll sell our milk overseas. Well, are people feeling, you know, that strongly?
Well, you take,
where's the incentive?
You take Fisher and Paykel, for example. If the government said we're going to put a price reduction on fridges, would they continue to supply the local market if they could make a better margin on selling fridges overseas? This is the laws of commerce. I'm absolutely firm that Fonterra must ensure its pricing's right, so that we're providing milk at the proper price for the local market. Got no problem with that.
It enters the supply chain at the right price, and then it's normal commerce rules of the supermarket margins, of the distributor margins. All of those are, I mean, if you sell a Mars bar or a bar of chocolate, ice cream, whatever, there is a standard margin that is applied to those contracts.
Look, the bottom line is we're giving these other companies milk. Obviously, there's more money being made from selling milk overseas. Otherwise, they would produce and sell that milk on the local market. They're choosing not to sell the milk on the local market because they can make more money overseas.
Should they be forced to sell some of that milk on the local market?
Well, I'm saying to qualify for that milk, they should have to put a percentage into the local market. They don't want to do it because they know there's no margins in the local market.
Neil?
Proof's in the pudding.
Well, I would turn that around slightly, and I would say there's a 3-year sunset. They're all meant to stop on the 31st of May in 3 years' time. It would be far better to have a guaranteed wind down rather than, you know, third over 3 years, because they'll lobby again and change the rules again. But yeah, it's just not practical, not sensible, and
you have to wonder what's wrong with Fonterra's supremacy in the industry. As I say, it's an incredible success story since 2001.
Yeah, but New Zealand only has 1.8% of the cows in the world. We've built a world-class industry that is, if we hadn't had Fonterra bringing in the $22 billion, where would we be as a nation? It's our key industry. Now, to go out and kick your key industry in the gut, so to speak, and that's what farmers are saying, it just defies all logic and reason. To breach the rules of commerce defies all logic and reason. They wouldn't do it to any other business because they wouldn't get away with it.
Does the government have a fight on its hands over this?
You bet.
Yeah. What can I say? He said it all.
Thanks.
And he's been very moderate.
For me, yes.
For you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Coming up after the break, the R word, racism, xenophobia and the Crayford Farm sale. How much of all the fuss is because the buyers are Chinese? And we ask our guests what else they want to get off their chests. Will it be a rant or a rave? More Straight Talk in a moment. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Time now for our guests to share or vent. Will it be a rant or a rave? Malcolm, I wanted to talk about the Crayford Farm sales just before I give you the last word on whatever it is you might want to talk about. There has been such an incredibly negative response to the Crayford Farms being sold to the Chinese. Some pretty crude foreigner bashing in some quarters. What is it in your view? Are people opposed to foreigners buying farms, or is it they're against the Chinese buying farms?
Not against the Chinese. I think the Crayford Farm provided a focus for what's been going on. There's a lot of land being sold into offshore ownership. I've simply got one philosophical stance on it, and that's we should have residential ownership. We need a residential ownership clause in the OIC, and that will solve all the problems. Neil, do you have a view either way?
Much like Malcolm, except I'm much more liberal on the residential. Yeah. The Harvard Endowment Fund, the Canadian Teachers Pension Fund has bought the cutting rights at Kaingaroa. The Harvard Fund was interested, I thought, in South Canterbury finance, but that didn't happen. There's a German superannuation fund or investment fund in Southland buying farms. Montana's been bought by Pernod. And Brightstar who's 50% ownership of Synlait, I see reported a month or so ago, is looking at Griffin's biscuits in Lower Hutt. You know, where is the concerns about? I mean, if it's good for one, it's got to be good for the other. And it's just, I'm afraid we just haven't recognised that China is where our future is. China and the Asia, Middle East, and that the Western economic centre is in decline to be replaced by China. We just have to adapt.
We have to just face up to the fact that, like it or not, Asia is important to New Zealand's future.
But I turn that around and say they see their future here.
Yep.
Not we should be seeing their future there.
We are an active participant in their future.
What about Michael Fay? Can I ask you? Should he's been vilified by some. should he not be lauded for at least trying to keep it Kiwi?
Well, I am, because I think he's testing the waters. No one else has got the ability to do it. Go, Michael.
The intent matches the outcome, and I'm sorry, but Sir Michael's history makes me a bit cynical about his present good works.
Do you think he still holds, he's clearly hoping he holds as much sway with the government as he did in previous years? Do you think he still does?
Maybe another generation has moved on from that.
Yeah, I think we've moved on, yeah.
And do you understand people's distrust and suspicion of why it is he wants to even get involved?
Oh, absolutely, but people change as time goes on. Life moves on. Nothing's always the same. My view is that he's got the resource to put in and test the OIC. Good on him. Go for it.
And as a strategic tactical decision, it might have been better if he was one of the team rather than the front person. I mean, if they'd had the iwi up as we want to be there, they might have got a lot more traction, a lot more sympathy. But Michael Fay, history, people remember, what was it, Transrail, BNZ.
People don't forget.
Well, the people who make decision remember 87, 84, 87.
Yeah, we won't forget that, but however, we move on.
Do you have a last word on anything that we've discussed today, or anything else, anything on your mind? Well,
I'm pretty concerned about where we're going with water and the claims on water. More concerned about the Green Party wanting to charge for water. However, I'm absolutely delighted that if we do end up having to pay for water in this country, I've got it figured that about 1 billion litres of water fall on every hectare I own, and I'm looking forward to being paid to allow that water to run into the waterways where everyone else is charging for water, and it might just be a new form of income for me.
In fact, you'll block your stop banks to hold it up as a bank.
Well, yeah, but you know, that's how ridiculous this water debate is. What are we going to do now? Put a price on air so that we citizens have to pay someone for the air we breathe? You know, where are we going with this?
You think it's a nonsense?
Look, it's a test of where we are as a people. If we're going to start allocating resources and the ability to charge resources to one sector of the community so they can charge another, then we've got no future as a nation. Some of these resources, like the air we breathe, the water we all need, it's just a nonsense, quite frankly. And I think that someone somewhere has got to provide some leadership to determine where we go, because this is a critical issue.
Leadership, not a focus group.
Neil, do you have a rant or a rave?
Yeah, my semi-rant. Want to encourage Fonterra shareholders to respond to the board's invitation to comment on trading among farmers. The board needs that feedback in order to be confident that they're heading in the direction that's comfortable with shareholders. The information is on Fence Post. They can get it, they can read it, but they need to participate in their co-op. I should also mention it's the year of the co-op, so the co-op needs to be strong. We all want a co-op to survive, and it only survives when the members are active and want to participate.
Get out there and get involved is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Like you have in the past and will do in the future. Just have to do it.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming along today. That's all we have time for this week on Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Thanks again to my guests, Neil McLean and Malcolm Lumsden, for coming in today. And thank you too at home for watching. I'm Karen McCarthy. Hope you can join us again next week for more Straight Talk.